My name is Claire, and for 6 years I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. I was wrong. I was the most watched. When I married Daniel, I didn't just marry a man. I married his mother. Vivian and I didn't find that out until it was almost too late. Let me back up. My father built his company, Hargrove Logistics, from nothing. 22 years old, one truck, a phone booth, and a stubborn refusal to fail. By the time I was born, he had a fleet. By the time I graduated college, he had 400 employees and contracts across 3 states. That company wasn't just a business to him, it was his second child. I met Daniel at a charity gala when I was 26. He was charming in that easy, practiced way. The kind of charm that feels like sunlight until you realize it never actually warms you. His mother, Vivian, was there too, dressed like she owned the room, and in a way, she did. She ran a consulting firm that, looking back, consulted on nothing anyone could ever name. Vivian loved me immediately. Too immediately. She called me the daughter I never had 3 weeks into dating her son. She sent gifts. She remembered things I'd mentioned once in passing, my father's health, the name of our head accountant, which floor my father's office was on. At the time, I thought, what a thoughtful woman. What an attentive future mother-in-law. I didn't think, what a strange thing to memorize. Daniel and I married a year later. My father walked me down the aisle in a wheelchair, and I remember Vivian crying harder than anyone, mascara running, hand pressed to her chest. I thought it was love. No, I know it was relief. She'd gotten what she wanted, a permanent seat at my family's table. Here's the thing about us. Company like my father's, you don't need to steal from it all at once. You bleed it slowly. You place people. You wait. You let years do the work for you. 6 months after the wedding, Vivian mentioned so casually that she knew a wonderful logistics coordinator looking for work. He's brilliant, she said, just between jobs. It would mean so much to me if you'd consider him. I did. Why wouldn't I? My mother-in-law was recommending a friend. That's what family does. Then it was a warehouse supervisor. Then a fleet dispatcher. Then someone in payroll of all departments. Each time, Vivian had a reason. Each time, the person she recommended was qualified enough to pass an interview and forgettable. Enough not to raise questions. I didn't count them. Why would I? I trusted her. Meanwhile, my marriage was quietly rotting. Daniel worked late, always at client dinners I was never invited to. He grew distant in that specific way men get distant when their attention has simply relocated elsewhere. I told myself it was stress. I told myself a lot of things. My father's health declined faster than his doctors expected. I started spending more hours at Hargrove Logistics, learning the business from the inside, payroll structures, route contracts, vendor agreements, the names and faces of every department head. And that's when I started noticing something odd, efficiency numbers that didn't match, contracts that mysteriously needed renegotiating right when we were about to sign favorable terms with a new client, warehouse inventory discrepancies that always, somehow, got explained away by the same 3 or 4 people before anyone dug deeper. I mentioned it to Daniel once over dinner, just an offhand comment. Something feels off with our Denver contracts? He didn't even look up from his phone. He just said, "You're overthinking it. You always overthink things when you're stressed." That sentence should have been a warning flare. Instead, I apologized. I actually apologized for noticing something wrong in my own father's company. Here's how it fell apart. 14 months ago, I asked Daniel for a divorce. Not because of the company, not yet, because of a woman named Renee, a colleague from one of those client dinners I was never invited to. I found messages on a laptop he forgot to log out of. 2 years of messages. 2 years of a marriage that had been, essentially, decorative on his end. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I hired a lawyer named Patricia Nguyen, sharp, calm, and terrifyingly thorough. And I told her I wanted this done clean, and I wanted it done right. Divorce proceedings have a strange side effect nobody warns you about: discovery. Lawyers dig. Financial records get subpoenaed. Every asset, every account, every shell of a business relationship gets dragged into daylight because both sides need to know what's actually on the table. That's when Patricia called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice unusually careful. "Claire," she said, "I need you to sit down before I tell you what my investigator found." She'd pulled financial disclosures related to Daniel's assets, standard procedure, but buried in those disclosures was something that had nothing to do with Daniel at all. It was a spreadsheet, a private one, from Vivian's consulting firm that had been referenced in an old financial filing because Vivian had, at some point, used company funds from that firm to pay referral bonuses. Referral bonuses! 27 of them, all paid to individuals who are currently employed at Hargrove Logistics, my father's company. I stared at that number for a long time. 27 people, 27 employees hired over 6 years. Every single one of them personally recommended by my mother-in-law. Every single one of them quietly compensated by a firm she controlled. For reasons the spreadsheet did no explain, but strongly implied. Patricia dug further because that's what she does. She's relentless in the most beautiful way. What she found over the following weeks made my stomach turn in a way I still haven't fully recovered from. Those 27 employees weren't just referrals. They were positioned, payroll, contracts, warehouse operations, client relations, fleet dispatch. Every single vulnerable pressure point in my father's company had someone loyal to Vivian sitting inside it. And over 6 years, small decisions had been nudged. A renegotiated contract here, a lost shipment there, an inventory discrepancy that always got quietly resolved before it reached my father's desk. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger an audit, just steady, patient siphoning, dressed up as bad luck and human error. The dispatcher who always rerouted trucks through a certain third-party carrier, a carrier that, it turned out, was partially owned by one of Vivian's cousins. The payroll coordinator who'd quietly approved consulting invoices from Vivian's firm for advisory services. My father never requested and never saw. The warehouse supervisor whose inventory numbers never quite added up, but always in ways too small to justify a full investigation. 27 threads woven so carefully that no single one looked suspicious. Together, they drained an estimated $1.8 million from my father's company over 6 years, and positioned Vivian's people to potentially do far more damage if the company had ever, say, changed ownership. If my father had died, if I had inherited it, if Daniel and I had stayed married and Daniel had eventually taken a more active role. I sat in my lawyer's office, and I felt something shift in my chest, not heartbreak this time, something colder, something clearer. I didn't confront Vivian right away. I've learned that revenge done in anger is sloppy, and sloppy revenge gives people room to spin a story. I wanted this done the way she'd done it to us, quietly, patiently, and with paperwork so airtight there was nowhere to run. I brought everything to my father first. He was weak by then, but his mind was sharp as ever. And I watched something break in his face as I laid it out for him. Not sadness. Exactly. Fury, banked low and controlled. The kind only a man who built something from nothing could feel about watching. Get quietly hollowed out someone he'd welcomed into his family. Do it right, he told me. Don't just fire them. Bury the paper trail so deep no lawyer can dig them out of it. So we did it right. I brought in a forensic accountant. We spent 6 weeks quietly auditing every one of those 27 employees, cross-referencing hiring dates, payment records, and Vivian's firm's financials. We built a case, not an accusation. Then, on a Monday morning, with our company's legal counsel present, I had all 27 brought in, not fired on the spot, but formally notified they were under internal investigation for financial misconduct, with documentation to back every claim. 14 of them quit within the week rather than face questioning. The other 13 were terminated with cause. And 3 of those cases were serious enough that my father's legal team referred them for prosecution. Embezzlement charges that are still working their way through the courts. And then there was Vivian. I requested a meeting with her, just the 2 of us, numbered Daniel, at a neutral coffee shop instead of her house, because I wanted her off her own territory. She arrived expecting, I think, to comfort me about the divorce. Instead, I slid a folder across the table, just 1 page on top, a summary of the 27 names, the referral payments, and the 6-year timeline. I watched the color leave her face in real time. Claire, she started, I can explain. You don't need to explain it to me, I said. You need to explain it to my father's lawyers, and possibly to a prosecutor, depending on how the embezzlement cases against your employees turn out. I'm not here to yell at you, Vivian. I already got what I needed. I just wanted you to know that I know, and I wanted you to hear it from me before it becomes public record. She didn't cry, which almost impressed me. She just sat there, very still, and said, I did it for Daniel. For your future. For the family. Nope, I said. You did it for control. And you nearly destroyed a man's life's work to get it. I left her at that table. I didn't look back. The divorce finalized 4 months later. Clean, fast, and, thanks to Patricia and everything Discovery had, uncovered extremely favorable to me. Daniel didn't fight hard. I think some part of him understood that fighting meant risking his mother's exposure becoming even more public than it already was. My father's company recovered faster than any of us expected. New hiring protocols, an outside audit every quarter now, and a board that finally understands vulnerability. Isn't always external. Sometimes it's a well-dressed woman at your dinner table who never once raised her voice. My father is doing better these days. Not fully well, but better. And every time I walk into his office and see it running clean, running right, I feel something in my chest settled that had been unsettled for 6 years without my even realizing it. As for Vivian, her consulting firm folded under the weight of the investigation. I heard secondhand that she moved to Arizona to start fresh. I don't wish her ill. I don't wish her anything, really. She's simply a closed chapter now. One I read all the way to the end so I'd never have to wonder about it again. People ask me sometimes if I regret marrying Daniel. I don't, actually. 'Cause if I hadn't, I might never have looked closely enough to find what his mother had spent 6 years hiding in plain sight. My divorce wasn't just an ending. It was the crowbar that pried open a door I didn't even know was locked. I lost a husband. I lost 6 years I can't get back. But I got my father's company back. I got my own judgment back. The part of me that had learned to doubt what I saw because someone told me I was overthinking it. And I got myself back. 27 employees. 6 years. 1 divorce. That's what it took to set me free.